The light within the grand conclave of the Solarian hegemony did not stream. It congealed. It was a viscous, deep violet luminescence filtered through layered, non-Euclidean crystalline structures that spanned the dome miles overhead, casting long, distorted shadows across the polished obsidian floor where the assembled elders stood. The air itself felt dense, recycled through millennia of hegemonic control, carrying the faint, metallic tang of ozone and the unspoken weight of countless conquered stellar nurseries. A profound, almost geological silence had settled, broken only by the slow, rhythmic exhalation of the primary counselor, Xyler, whose massive, chitinous form seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Before the dais, shimmering in the central void, was the projected image of the Terran vessel, a stark, utterly unremarkable gray wedge of metal, utterly devoid of the ornamentation or bioluminescence favored by every known interstellar power. It was small, criminally small, yet it rested insolently in the charted void bordering the contested Cygnian Veil, utterly unafraid of the hegemony's preliminary deployment. "Silence is not tactical," hissed Krell, the delegate from the rimward sector, his vocal cords vibrating the crystal beneath his segmented feet. His carapace, usually a proud, iridescent emerald, was dulled with anxiety. "It is either incompetence or profound arrogance. We have extended the standard 7-cycle courtesy query. They have offered nothing but the rhythmic emission of background radiation consistent with a hibernation cycle. They are sleeping while orbiting the entrance to the veil." Xyler shifted, a sound like tectonic plates grinding together. His compound eyes, multifaceted lenses recording every shift in atmospheric pressure and light refraction, focused on the Terran projection. "Arrogance, Krell, is a luxury afforded only to the powerful. The hegemony has never encountered a species with fewer than 3 developmental steps separating them from rudimentary fission capacity when they first entered the galactic registry. These humans registered only cycles prior. Their technological signature is primitive, based on chaotic fusion reactions and reliance on solid-state computation. We estimate their total fleet strength, based on intercepted low-band telemetry, to be negligible. Yet they are here." A ripple of uncomfortable energy passed through the assembled dignitaries. The hegemony valued predictability above all things. Its governance was built upon eons of catalogued aggression, established protocols for submission, and predictable evolutionary bottlenecks. Humanity was an anomaly that refused to fit the established matrices. They did not beg for resources, they did not immediately offer tribute, nor did they flee. They simply were, an unreadable presence in a sector vital to the hegemony's millennia-old claim over the galactic core regions. "Perhaps they possess a localized stealth field beyond our detection parameters," suggested Lyra, the chief diplomatic officer, her voice smoother, designed to soothe political friction, yet carrying an edge of genuine concern. "We have detected no phase shift manipulation indicative of true cloaking technology, only crude reflective materials. If they are not cloaked, then their confidence is an act of sheer, blind madness." "Madness does not propel a species across light years," Xyler rumbled, his tone shifting towards philosophical assessment, a habit cultivated over his 3 standard centuries of service. "Madness is transient. Persistence, however, implies a core philosophical underpinning. What is the underpinning of a species that builds vessels capable of such travel, yet communicates with the belligerent silence of a stone?" The debate continued for several planetary rotations, weaving through established hegemonic doctrine. They analyzed the Terran's biological profile, bipedal, soft-bodied, dependent on narrow atmospheric tolerances, possessing a curiously volatile emotional spectrum, and found nothing to warrant their current stance. They were weak. They were young. They should be supplicating. Instead, the single Terran vessel, designated by the hegemony's preliminary analysis as the Odyssey, a name which struck the elders as needlessly grandiose for such a meager craft, simply maintained its position. And then, the incident occurred, not a military aggression, but a calculated, precise insertion into the political atmosphere. Sensor sweeps registered a shift. The Odyssey had dispatched an object. Not a weapon, not a probe for survey, but a tightly focused, low-energy transmission beam directed not at the hegemony's flagship, the inviolable will, but directly at the perimeter markers defining the Cygnian Veil, markers that represented the boundary of hegemonic territorial definition. The object carried no threat, no declaration of sovereignty. It carried data, and the data was immediately flagged by the hegemony's primary computational nexus as hostile purely due to its complexity and sheer volume. Krell slammed a clawed appendage onto the polished floor. "They are transmitting. They are attempting to overwrite our boundary definitions, an act of blatant digital trespass. Xyler held up a massive, articulated hand, silencing the outburst instantly. Run the decryption matrix. Prioritize the core sequence. If they seek to wage information warfare, we must understand the weapon. The central holographic display flickered, replacing the Terran ship silhouette with flowing streams of incomprehensible glyphs and rapidly resolving geometric structures. The hegemony's best cryptographers, beings whose minds functioned at near-light speeds, labored for cycles. The initial findings were baffling. The data was not encrypted in a conventional sense. It was structured according to principles utterly alien to known galactic mathematics. It was dense, layered, and utterly redundant in places, yet frighteningly efficient in others. "Counselor," reported the chief analyst, a nervous, slender being named Thriss, whose usual domain was orbital mechanics. "The payload, it is not a virus. It is not a weaponized subroutine. It is a library, a structured repository of knowledge." Xyler leaned forward, the movement sending subtle pressure waves through the chamber. "Knowledge of what?" "Of their immediate objectives, Counselor," Thriss stammered, visibly struggling to categorize the deluge. "It details their entire operational doctrine for this sector, their projected resource extraction rates, their desired diplomatic parity, and a complete, high-fidelity schematic of their propulsion drive, detailing inefficiencies we should have noticed immediately." Krell sputtered in disbelief. "They are giving us their schematics. They are revealing their weaknesses before the first exchange of fire. This confirms arrogance. They believe we will be so preoccupied analyzing the blueprints that we will ignore the small vessel itself." "No," Xyler murmured, his mental processes already far ahead of the reactive alarm of his peers. He stared at the stream of data, sensing the pattern beneath the chaotic surface presentation. "This is not arrogance. This is transparency. Unnecessary, profound transparency. They are not attempting to hide their capability. They are attempting to establish a baseline of mutual understanding using the only currency they assume we value, quantifiable information." It was then, after the data had been assimilated and cross-referenced against the hegemony's vast historical archives containing the rise and fall of 20,000 civilizations, that the first true tremor of unease struck the core of the Solarian political structure. The humans had provided a comprehensive history of their species, development, presented with the sterile objectivity of a scientific paper. They detailed their great unifications, their brief, brutal interstellar expansion, and the specific failures of logic that had nearly resulted in their self-immolation during their age of fragmentation, 4 standard centuries prior. The elders had expected defiance. They had prepared for veiled threats. They had not prepared for a species presenting its own psychological pathology for peer review. "They present their past failures as evidence of their current reliability," Lyra observed quietly, processing the ethical implications. "They are stating without rhetoric that they understand the dangers of unchecked ambition because they have already lived through the consequences. And yet they stand here, possessing technology that seems rudimentary, challenging our established dominance," Xyler countered, the philosophical tension mounting. "What drives such a species? A species that documents its own failings with such precision? If they are so aware of the pitfalls of conflict, why have they positioned themselves here, where conflict is inevitable?" The answer arrived less than a cycle later, delivered with the same cold, professional precision as the data library. A focused, narrowband transmission addressed directly to the hegemony's command frequency. It was an audio-visual burst, remarkably short. It depicted a single Terran individual, a female, judging by the secondary biological markers, standing against a featureless gray background. Her expression was neutral, her posture upright. The translation software, integrated with the initial data dump, provided a direct, synthesized voice output, devoid of inflection, perfectly mirroring the visual comm. "This is Terran Command, designated First Contact Protocol Sigma. We observe your military readiness. We observe your established hegemony over this sector. We understand your perspective regarding our proximity. We do not contest your historical claims, nor do we seek to usurp your authority through force projection. We are here because a defined existential threat vector has been identified, originating from the Signian Veil structure itself. This threat is not a military power seeking territory. It is a contagion of energy and matter instability that threatens galactic equilibrium. Our sole objective is the stabilization of the core sector boundary. We require a 15% zone of transit corridor access for the duration of the necessary stabilization sequence. Any attempt to impede our access will be interpreted as direct interference with a necessary quarantine procedure. We will not initiate aggression, but we will respond with absolute defensive capability to secure the quarantine corridor. Your cooperation is requested, but your interference will be neutralized. The projection vanished. The silence returned, heavier now, saturated with revelation. Krell was the first to break the stillness, his voice laced with a rising hysteria that he could not contain. Neutralized? They speak of neutralizing the Solarian hegemony's border defense fleets as if swatting an insect. This is the most audacious declaration of war masked as a polite administrative request ever recorded in galactic history. They offer us a choice between subservience and eradication, framed as a necessary stabilization sequence. Xyler did not react to the panic. He looked instead at the residual holographic data, specifically at the complex energy equations used to describe the contagion within the veil. These were not equations based on conventional dark matter interaction or known exotic particle physics. They were rooted in a dimensional modeling that the hegemony had only theorized about in the most esoteric of their research outposts, concepts dismissed as mathematically elegant but physically impossible. They speak of a contagion, Xyler articulated slowly, his voice gaining a deep resonance that pulled all attention back to him. A threat that transcends political boundaries, a threat our established models of reality cannot fully account for. He paused, letting the implication settle. And they arrive not with a fleet designed for conquest, but with a single vessel, designed seemingly for endurance, carrying the comprehensive analytical tools necessary to address a cosmological instability. Lyra stepped forward, her composure only slightly fractured. Counselor, they are applying logic to an existential problem. They are treating the hegemony not as a political rival, but as a neighbor whose cooperation is required for regional survival. If their assessment of this contagion is accurate, then their immediate priority is survival, not dominion. And if they are lying, Krell challenged, trembling. If this is a feint, if the instability is a fabrication designed to force us to withdraw our fleets from the Veil boundary, leaving the critical trade routes vulnerable to a genuine, hidden human invasion force. Xyler turned his massive form fully towards Krell. Then, Elder Krell, we will have been deceived by a species that chose honesty about its intentions, however aggressive those intentions may be, over the centuries of careful, nuanced deception practiced by every other nascent power we have encountered. Which entity poses the greater long-term threat to the stability of the hegemony, the predictable tyrant or the unpredictable minimalist? The decision was made not out of trust, but out of necessity dictated by the sheer scope of the data presented. The hegemony could not afford to dismiss a threat that potentially involved the degradation of physical law within its core territories. Xyler ordered a reduction in the immediate blockade force around the Odyssey, replacing kinetic engagement protocols with advanced passive monitoring. The galaxy, which had been bracing for the inevitable clash between the ancient hegemony and the emergent Terran entity, held its breath, observing the uneasy truce. For 3 cycles, nothing happened. The human vessel remained inert, a passive observer. Then the Odyssey initiated its movement. It did not charge the defensive perimeter. It moved with agonizing slowness, its minimal energy signature registering less than a stray asteroid, charting a precise vector directly toward the densest region of anomalous energy readings within the Cygnian Veil, the very region the hegemony had deemed too dangerous to approach without overwhelming force. The hegemony's observation vessels followed at a respectful, cautious distance. They witnessed the Odyssey execute a maneuver previously thought impossible for a conventional drive system. Instead of traversing space, the vessel seemed to fold the surrounding geometry. There was no disruptive warp signature, no gravitational spike. It simply ceased to occupy one location and instantaneously occupied another, deeper within the instability field, an act of spatial manipulation that required physics orders of magnitude beyond hegemonic understanding. The first visual confirmation of the stabilization effort was transmitted. Back, the humans were not deploying massive energy-intensive emitters, the expected mechanism for containing cosmic forces. Instead, they deployed small, geometrically perfect tetrahedral drones. These drones, no larger than a hegemonic cruiser's primary sensor array, did not fight the energy instability. They absorbed it, resonating with the chaotic field, dampening the fluctuations through precise counter-vibrations. It was engineering applied with the delicacy of a master surgeon applying sealant to a hairline fracture. They are not pushing the problem away, Lyra breathed, watching the data scroll across her console. They are assimilating the instability into their own controlled parameters. It is elegant. Krell remained unconvinced, his fear curdling into resentment. Elegance does not win wars, counselor. Their calm precision is merely the veneer over a deep-seated hunger. They are showcasing their capabilities to coerce us into compliance. Xyler ignored him, focusing on the psychological impact this demonstration was having on the hegemony's fleet commanders. A morale degradation born of realizing that their entire military doctrine, based on overwhelming kinetic projection, was obsolete against this new form of conflict management. Prepare a direct, non-hostile communication channel, Xyler commanded. Use the baseline universal linguistics matrix they provided in their initial data package. We will not ask questions about their motives. We will ask questions about the problem. The response from the Odyssey was immediate this time, a transition from automated protocol to conscious engagement. The synthesized voice returned, cleaner now, adapted to the hegemony's complex phonemes, yet still utterly devoid of emotional color. Terran Command acknowledges direct query from Solarian Hegemony Primary Counselor Xyler. We await input regarding the Stabilization Field Integrity Assessment. Xyler approached the projection interface himself. His massive form filled the display screen, an embodiment of ancient, implacable authority. We observe your methodology. It is efficient. However, your projections of the necessary duration for containment, approximately 50 standard years, are unacceptable for the preservation of hegemonic economic flow through this sector. Furthermore, your deployment of counter-resonance vectors requires an energy sink capacity we cannot verify from your vessel's signature. Explain the source of this required energy, or we must conclude your operation will result in a localized collapse, rendering the veil unusable for generations. The human voice replied instantly, the lack of hesitation unnerving. Counselor Xyler, your concern regarding energy expenditure is mathematically valid based on the known laws of thermodynamic application within standard spatial continua. However, the energy required for localized resonance dampening against this specific ontological contagion is not derived from internal fusion sources. A beat of profound silence descended across the conclave. Then where is it derived? Xyler demanded, his voice resonating with the deep bass undertone that signaled true imperial command. It is derived from the ambient background radiation of the universe, counselor, the human stated simply. Specifically, from the entropy gradient established during the universe's infancy. Our technology permits us to capture and redirect minute quantities of this inherent universal degradation. We are not consuming power, we are temporarily adjusting the direction of decay within a confined field. This was the reveal that fractured the hegemony's arrogance entirely. The energy required for massive cosmic stabilization, the energy that should have demanded thousands of specialized vessels drawing on local stellar nurseries, was being harvested from the very fabric of spacetime's inexorable slide towards heat death. It was power not just clean, but fundamentally cosmic in origin. Krell began to laugh, a dry, rattling sound that spoke of utter psychological collapse. They steal from the end of time itself. This is not science. This is blasphemy against the orderly progression of existence. Lyra, however, saw the ethical implication immediately. Counselor, if they can manage the universe's decay, they are not concerned with a mere sector boundary. They are operating on a scale of preservation that dwarfs our entire civilization's scope. Precisely, Xyler agreed, turning back to the projection. Terran Command, we accept the validity of your operational description. We now require a demonstration of ethical framework. If you possess the power to manipulate fundamental cosmic processes, what prevents you from imposing your singular vision of order upon the entire hegemony, or indeed the entire galaxy? The human response was immediate, measured, and chillingly rational. Counselor Xyler, the imposition of a singular vision is a mechanism predicated upon a belief in inherent superiority or the pursuit of resource acquisition. Neither is our primary motivator. Furthermore, the principles required to manage entropy gradients are not transferable through simple technological acquisition. They require a fundamental philosophical alignment, a rejection of the zero-sum conflict model that characterizes the hegemony's rise. Our species reached a global consensus. The pursuit of external expansion must cease until internal, existential threats are contained. We have solved our own self-destruction. Now we observe the periphery for similar dangers. The demonstration of their ethical core was their restraint. They had the means to devastate the Solarian fleet with a momentary flicker of dimensional realignment, yet they applied only the minimum force required to maintain their operational zone. They offered knowledge, not subjugation. They prioritized the containment of a universal threat over the subjugation of a regional power. This calm, almost detached objectivity was more intimidating than any war cry. "Your vessel," Xyler stated, recognizing the political tide turning irrevocably. "It suggests you are alone in this endeavor. This is not plausible. A stabilization effort of this magnitude requires coordinated logistics and specialized support structures." The human paused for the first time, the brief delay suggesting a translation of an internal decision, not a technical query. "We are not alone," the voice confirmed. "The Odyssey is merely the designated survey and initial intervention platform. The logistical support is currently inbound." "Inbound from where?" Lyra pressed. "Our deep-range sensors show no armada approaching." "They are not using conventional jump gates or standard warp vectors, Counselor," the human explained. "They are traversing the voids stabilized by the Odyssey's preliminary work. They will arrive when the localized entropy field is sufficiently attenuated to permit safe emergence into this spacetime region." The tension in the conclave became unbearable. They had been facing a single, small, defiant vessel. Now they were being told that the arrival of the true force was contingent upon the success of the human's initial stabilizing work. The human entity was not the threat. It was the harbinger, the advance scout for an operation of cosmic scale. "What is this true force?" Xyler asked, every molecule of his ancient being focused on this impending revelation. "What species do you represent that operates on this scale of universal architecture?" The human did not answer directly. Instead, the visual feed from the Odyssey shifted. The focus pulled back, away from the chaotic energy fluctuations within the veil, moving outward past the hegemony's own perimeter ships, past the known star clusters, until the sheer blackness of intergalactic void dominated the screen. Then in the far periphery of the sensor view, something began to coalesce. It was not a fleet of ships defined by hulls or thrusters. It was a vast, geometric structure, appearing in the void as if carved from the very darkness itself. It was immense, a lattice of incomprehensible scale, spanning distances that dwarfed the hegemony's largest known territorial holdings. It moved with an impossible deliberateness, a geometric tapestry knitting itself through the vacuum. "This," the human voice stated, devoid of pride or arrogance, simply stating fact, "is the framework that manages the entropy gradients. The hegemony refers to local territories, political structures, and resource competition. We refer to the structural integrity of the local supercluster. The species that constructed and maintains this framework refers to itself as the architects of the deep. They are the custodians of the universal mechanism." The scale of the revelation crushed the political posturing of the elders. Their empire, their millennia of dominance, their carefully balanced alliances, all suddenly revealed as the squabbles of children on a small, dusty corner of a single, manageable nebula, while forces existed that treated the very laws of physics as maintenance schedules. "And humanity is aligned with these architects," Lyra whispered, the diplomatic protocol entirely irrelevant now in the face of transcendental power. "Humanity," the human replied, the synthesized voice exhibiting the slightest shift in cadence, the only sign of conscious contemplation, "is the current operational vanguard for this sector's long-term stability program. We are the local response mechanism. We were developed precisely for the failure modes that result when a rapidly expanding civilization encounters a fundamental universal challenge it is not equipped to handle, a challenge which, historically, results in localized causality failure. The hegemony's current trajectory, if unchecked by this stabilization, would have contributed to the failure cascade." The implication hung heavy in the dense atmosphere of the conclave, the hegemo. NY, in its arrogance and expansion, was unintentionally creating the conditions for cosmic collapse. Their aggressive policies were not just threats to each other. They were geological hazards to the underlying stability of reality. Krell, stripped of his political weaponry, reverted to pure primal fear. "You call us a hazard?" You who arrived in a single, brittle shell. The shell is irrelevant, the human said. The methodology is the measure. We present the logic that supersedes brute force. We understand that the concept of the elder implies accumulated wisdom. We bring that wisdom, distilled through a species that learned the hard way that the greatest power is the power to refrain from destruction. Xyler, the most ancient of the gathered elders, finally understood the nature of the true HFY dynamic. It was not about humans being stronger in combat. It was about humans being logically superior in the face of cosmic adversity. They possessed the maturity, the hard-won, self-inflicted scar tissue of near extinction, to prioritize survival over dominance. We request the necessary access corridor, Xyler stated, his voice low, accepting the new reality. We will redeploy our defense structures to monitor the periphery, providing passive coverage against any unforeseen kinetic threats emerging from the sector that might interfere with your stabilization work. Cooperation is appreciated, Counselor Xyler, the Terran responded. The stabilization process will require a further 10 cycles of precise field calibration before the architects can fully integrate their support structure. During this time, we request that the hegemony monitor the periphery for other threats. Other threats? Lyra questioned instantly. Threats beyond the contagion. The human paused again, the delay longer this time, suggesting the introduction of a complex, perhaps sensitive, piece of tactical information. Yes, the voice confirmed. The ontological contagion within the veil is merely the residue of an ancient, failed defense mechanism. It is the slow bleed of something that was once deliberately sealed away. While we are attending to the containment, the hegemony and its allies must understand that the threat we are facing is not the containment failure itself, but what that containment failure was designed to hold back. The holographic screen returned to the single, small Terran vessel, the Odyssey, small and insignificant against the encroaching darkness, yet holding the key to the immediate survival of the local cluster. When the contagion is sealed, the human concluded, the synthesized voice dropping to a near-subaudible frequency that nonetheless permeated the chamber, the true breach will become apparent. We have detected the signal pulse associated with the entity that necessitated the original sealing protocol. It is waking up. It has been dormant since before the hegemony was a concept. We require your knowledge of the local topology to ensure our defensive perimeter is positioned correctly when the old watchers realize the seals are being tested. The focus shifted entirely from political maneuvering to existential dread. The galaxy was not under threat from a rising power competing for resources. It was under threat from an ancient enemy, one so formidable that an earlier, unknown civilization had spent unimaginable effort merely to seal it away, utilizing a universal infrastructure managed by a species that humanity had apparently tapped into as its guiding principle. The Solarian hegemony was not facing a localized challenge. They were standing on the precipice of a war of cosmic antiquity, a conflict where political borders meant nothing compared to the structural integrity of existence itself. The realization struck Xyler with the force of a dying star. Humanity had not arrived to conquer or negotiate. They had arrived as the necessary, self-aware immune response to a galactic cancer, and the hegemony had nearly declared war on its own physician. The fight against the contagion was merely the prologue to a much larger, terrifying confrontation with whatever the old watchers truly were. The true scale of the war was just beginning to unfold.